On the opening Friday, 54,515 vehicles rolled into Sturgis, and traffic was running above normal. 5 days later, on Wednesday, the count had fallen to 42,964, nearly 24% below what that day usually pulls. And everyone who filmed those empty streets agreed on why. It got too expensive, they said, so the bikers packed up and went home. But South Dakota counts every vehicle at 9 checkpoints, all 10 days. And those numbers tell a very different story. So what actually emptied Sturgis in 2026? Grab a coffee, because the real answer is stranger than a $25 cheeseburger. Here's the number that started every argument. When the rally ended on August 16th, the South Dakota Department of Transportation had counted 448,166 vehicles rolling into Sturgis over the 10 days. In 2025, that same count hit 537,459. So year over year, Sturgis was down more than 16%. That is a real drop, and nobody is pretending it isn't. Plenty of vendors really were down, some of them badly, and the gaps in the crowd that people filmed on Main Street were real too. If you were standing there watching the sidewalk thin out on a weekday afternoon, you were not imagining it. But before we blame those hotel prices, look at how that number even gets made, because it changes what down 16% actually means. South Dakota doesn't sell tickets to Sturgis. There's no gate, no wristband, no turnstile at the edge of town. Instead, the state lays rubber road counters at 9 spots on the highways into Sturgis, and every 2 axles that roll across one counts as a single vehicle. That is the whole system. A lone rider on a motorcycle counts as one. A pickup towing a trailer with 4 bikes on it counts as one too, plus the trailer. So the number was never a head count of human beings, just a count of axles crossing rubber tubes on the highways into town. The city puts out its own rough attendance estimates too, but the vehicle count is the one everybody quotes, because it is the only hard published number that exists. It is a proxy. A useful one, but a proxy, and it only counts vehicles coming in. It cannot tell you when anyone left, or whether a rider stayed for 2 days or 10. Hold on to that, because it matters later. And when you hear that Sturgis was down by that much, what you are really hearing is that fewer of those axles crossed than crossed the summer before. And the summer before is exactly where this gets interesting. Because 2025 was not a normal year. It was the 85th anniversary rally, and anniversary years at Sturgis are a completely different animal. That count of 537,459 was the biggest since 2015, the year of the legendary 75th, when the state's counters logged a record of nearly 747,000 vehicles, and the city put the crowd at around 739,000 people. Anniversary years pull the riders who only show up for the big round numbers, the ones who make the trip once every 5 or 10 years to say they were there. And then the next year, a lot of them stay home. South Dakota officials said as much this year. Historically, the count runs lower in the year right after an anniversary. It isn't an ironclad rule. The odd pandemic year actually broke it when 2021 came in higher than 2020. But after a giant round number rally, a step down the next year is the pattern far more often than not. The cleanest example is 2015 itself. The year after that record, the count fell by nearly 40%. So stacking 2026 up against 2025 is a little like stacking a normal Tuesday against the Super Bowl and being shocked the Tuesday looks quiet. A fairer comparison is against the state's 5-year average, and the state runs that math for you. Measured against the previous 5 years, 2026 came in about 10% down, not the 16% everyone kept quoting. The final count of 448,166 landed about 50,000 vehicles under the 5-year average of 498,042. And that 5-year figure is itself propped up by the huge 2025 number. So if you strip 2025 out and compare only to the 4 years before it, the drop is smaller still, closer to 8%. Still lower, still a soft year, but down 8 to 10% is a quiet summer, not the stampede for the exits people were describing. And that gap between the two numbers, the scary 16 and the boring 10, is the first sign that the story going around has a hole in it. Now here's a part almost nobody put in a thumbnail, and it might be one of the biggest reasons the whole thing felt thin. Look at the calendar. The Sturgis Rally always kicks off on the first Friday in August, and that Friday can land anywhere from the 1st to the 7th. In 2026, it fell on the 7th, the latest the rally can possibly start. That is not unheard of. The 2020 rally opened on the 7th too. But it does shove the whole thing to the very back edge of the calendar, and in early August, that one extra week matters more than you would think. Push the rally that late and you ride straight into the back-to-school wall. Kids going back to class, high school football cranking up, families trying to grab one last ordinary weekend before the school year routine swallows everything. Even riders who never missed Sturgis suddenly had to wait 10 days in South Dakota against getting a kid to a first day of school. Now there's no survey that counts how many stayed home for that reason, so nobody can put a hard number on it. But local businesses had raised exactly this worry the last time the calendar landed this late, back before the 2020 rally, and both of the biggest videos breaking down this year flagged the late start out loud as a real drag on turnout before a single drop of rain fell or a single price got jacked up on Main Street. The calendar never asked anyone about hotel rooms. It just quietly decided how many people could realistically come at all, months before anybody swung a leg over a bike. And think about who a late start actually removes from the crowd. The retired couple on the trike with nothing but open time can still roll in whenever they please. The people it squeezes out are the working families, the riders with school-age kids, the ones burning vacation days they had been hoarding all year for exactly this trip. Those are the people a first week of school collision quietly prices out of the calendar, and not one of them needed to see a menu board to make that call. So let's actually walk the week, one day at a time, because the state's daily counts tell the entire story if you just read them in order, instead of reacting to whichever afternoon somebody happened to film. Friday, the opener, 54,515 vehicles, running about 3% above its historical average for that day. Saturday, even bigger, 58,519, again above normal. 2 days in, Sturgis is beating its own historical numbers. That doesn't prove prices scared nobody off. But it does knock down the simplest version of the story, the idea that sticker shock alone kept riders away before the rally even started. Then Sunday, the count slips to 55,448, and for the first time it drops below its historical normal by more than 7%. Monday, a little lower, down around 8. Tuesday, lower again, down almost 12% from normal. There is no single catastrophe in there, no day where the bottom falls out, just a slow, steady leak. And this is the part the panic videos skipped entirely. Traffic always falls off through the week at Sturgis. The weekend is the peak. The weekdays are quieter. That is true every single year, anniversary or not, boom year or bust. So the slide on its own proves absolutely nothing. What actually matters is how far it slid, and which day the gap from normal got the widest. And even the running totals stayed calm while it slid. 5 days in, through that first Tuesday, the state had counted about 275,000 vehicles, only 4.7% under the 5-year pace. Push it to 6 days, and it was still only about 8% under. Those are the numbers of a rally that came in a little light and kept drifting a little lighter every day. Nothing like the freefall the empty street clips were selling. By the way, if you are into this kind of thing, hit subscribe, because I dig into the real stories behind motorcycle culture every week, and this rally still has a couple of surprises left in it. Now back to that midweek dip, because this is the exact spot where the whole everyone fled story either lives or dies. Here is what actually happened in the middle of the week. The first few days were warm and mostly sunny, if a little hazy, and we will get to that haze in a minute. Then on Tuesday afternoon, August 11th, it turned violent. A supercell blew up in the northern Black Hills right around 1 o'clock and tore southeast, dropping giant hail near the little town of Nemo and stones close to 4 inches across down by Hermosa, the kind of storm you never want to be caught in on 2 wheels. The next day, Wednesday the 12th, is when the traffic count posted its worst number of the whole rally. 42,964 vehicles, nearly 24% below what that Wednesday would normally pull. Not the fewest vehicles of the week, but the widest gap below normal, and the one number every Sturgis is dying video reached for. Now look at the timing. The giant hail hit Tuesday. The worst traffic number came the very next morning, Wednesday, when riders woke up to yet another severe thunderstorm watch, and a lot of them clearly decided they were done. So weather mattered, and it mattered a lot. But here is what the panic videos got backwards. The sky did not clear the moment Wednesday ended. It stayed ugly. Thursday was gray and wet, Friday brought more storms, and Saturday was cold and damp with highs stuck in the 70s. Only the final Sunday finally dried out, and the traffic tracked the weather all the way down. Thursday ran about 18% below normal, Friday about 14, Saturday about 17. So this was not a 2-day blip that bounced back the moment the sun came out. It was the better part of a week of miserable riding weather landing on a crowd that was already coming in light. In raw numbers, the count kept sliding to the finish the way it always does as riders head home. About 41,700 vehicles. Thursday, 39,700 Friday, 28,700 Saturday, and just under 20,000 on that final Sunday. And the one bright spot in the whole back half was that closing Sunday, which came in only about 6% under a normal last day. But weather only explains 2 days. It does not explain why the whole rally ran a notch below normal from Sunday onward. And this is where the boring, undramatic reasons come in, the ones that will never make a good thumbnail. Start with gas, because this one you can actually measure. Regular gas was running about $4.10 per gallon that August, which AAA called the most expensive August on record, and close to $1 more per gallon than the summer before. Riders said it straight out, that some of their buddies just didn't make the trip this year because the drive alone had gotten too expensive, and the drive to Sturgis is no small thing. Pull up a map and find Sturgis. It sits deep in the northern Great Plains, tucked into the Black Hills of South Dakota, hundreds of miles from any major city. For a lot of riders, getting there means hundreds of miles in the saddle, and for plenty of them, well over 1,000 each way. That is days of riding, tank after tank of fuel, and nights in hotels before you have even arrived. For somebody crossing half the country, the fuel bill gets ugly fast, and in a tight year, that is one of the first trips to fall off the calendar. Now add the wildfire smoke that had blown in from fires in the Pacific Northwest and Canada, which hazed over those famous Black Hills views for the opening weekend, and then the heat, because that opening weekend was brutally hot, near 100 degrees around Sturgis, with the surrounding plains running well into the triple digits. The reasons to skip this particular year just kept stacking on top of each other. None of it is a scandal. It was simply a harder year than most to justify a very long, very expensive ride. And if you have ever actually planned this trip, you know exactly what that ride costs before you even factor in a hotel. Months of saving, a route mapped across half the country, time booked off work, the bike prepped, and the bags loaded. One rider who made it out this year said the fuel alone ran about $800, and that was in a van, before a single night of lodging or a single meal on Main Street. When the whole country is watching its money, that is the exact kind of trip that becomes very easy to talk yourself out of for one summer. Okay, now we can finally talk about the prices, because they are real, and I am not going to sit here and pretend the sticker shock at Sturgis hasn't gotten out of hand. Riders and vendors on the ground described hotel rooms going for $500 a night, RV hookups, another $500 a night, Airbnbs renting for $25,000 to $30,000 for the 10-day stretch, a decent room at a chain hotel running past $5,000 for the rally, And out on the street, $25 for a burger, $25 for a plate of 3 tacos, $25 to $30 for a single turkey leg. Now, in fairness, those are the extreme examples, the ones that go viral. The typical short-term rental in Sturgis actually averaged closer to $370 a night, and plenty of campgrounds and RV parks ran well under the horror stories. But the sticker shock at the top end is real, and plenty of people are sick of it. You can hear it in every comment section, the sense that a working rider and their family are slowly getting priced out of a rally that used to belong to them. But this is where I have to be careful, and where most of the other videos were not. The traffic counters cannot tell you this next part, because remember, they only count vehicles coming in. They cannot see when anyone left or how long they stayed. So anyone waving the state's data around as proof people fled early is inventing something the numbers cannot show. What we do have is what the people on the ground described. The riders and reporters who cover this rally for a living said they watched folks chop a 10-day plan down to 5, packing up early once the storms rolled in and the money ran thin. You could hear the same thing at the concerts. One of the big Buffalo Chip nights that used to be shoulder to shoulder was, by one longtime reporter's account, the emptiest he had ever seen it. Treat that as what it is. Eyewitness accounts the counters cannot confirm. But it fits a crowd that showed up strong, then hit a week of bad weather and steep prices, and decided partway through that it had spent enough. The vendors felt the thin back half either way. A barbecue guy from Nebraska said his crowd was down about 30% from what he had braced for, and another vendor reported losing tens of thousands compared to last year. Though even that was not universal, because other businesses in town reported packed nights and lodging booked to capacity, which tells you the pain landed unevenly, and it lands hardest on the vendors because they are the ones paying to play. Booth space on the good streets costs a small fortune. They haul their trailers in from all over the country, and they get these 10 days and only these 10 days to earn the whole thing back. So when the crowd thins on the back half of the week, the person it hurts most is the vendor who spent thousands of dollars to be there, now watching part of their season ride off toward the parking lot. So let me be straight with you, because a good story has to survive the inconvenient facts too. This was not a fake crisis. 2026 really was a soft year. That final count of 448,166 came in below even the strange lockdown pandemic rally of 2020, which makes it the lowest 10-day count in the state's current series. On paper, this was one of the quietest Sturgis rallies in years. If you were a vendor who paid thousands of dollars for a booth and hauled your whole operation across 3 states, this year genuinely hurt, and no amount of context makes that money back. That part is completely true. But here's the distinction that got lost in all the noise. There is a real difference between a quiet year and a mass walkout, and what happened at Sturgis was the quiet year. Nobody stormed out over the price of a cheeseburger. The crowd came in strong on the weekend, slipped through the normal weekday slide, and then got buried by the better part of a week of storms and cold, wet roads that barely let up until the final day. Underneath all of it sat a rally that started as late as the calendar allows, in a summer of record gas prices and wildfire smoke, 1 year after an anniversary that was always going to make the next year look small by comparison. And here's a detail that quietly kills the chaos and collapse version of events. DUIs were down from last year, misdemeanor drug arrests were down, injury crashes fell hard, from 66 down to 39, and deaths dropped too. A couple of categories ticked up, felony drug arrests and total citations, but the things that actually matter, the crashes and the fatalities, all moved the right way. This was a smaller, calmer rally, running on a schedule the calendar had written before anyone even arrived. So what really emptied Sturgis in 2026? The honest answer is that there was no single villain. That scary 16% headline is mostly an illusion, the price of measuring an ordinary year against a giant anniversary. Against a normal year, the crowd was down closer to 10%, maybe 8%, and that gap leaked out of a whole stack of reasons, all pushing the same direction. The rally started as late as the calendar allows. Gas hit a record. Smoke and heat fouled the opening weekend. Storms hammered the middle of the week. And yes, the prices had climbed steep enough to give a tired, soaked rider one more reason to head home early. You can see every one of those pressures in the record. What you cannot honestly do, and what half the internet did anyway, is point at the $25 cheeseburger and call it the whole story. Because this is what the town of 7,100 people should actually keep an eye on. This year, the anniversary math was still doing them a favor, flattering a genuinely thin crowd by comparison. The real test comes in an ordinary year, with no big round number on the calendar to hide behind. That is the year we find out whether Sturgis was just having a quiet season or whether the crowd is starting to thin for good. But that is a story for the next video.